Rev up your engines. All right, today I'm going to show you something you should always do. If you get in a big wreck, take your vehicle to your mechanic after it gets fixed, because you can't trust anybody these days. This Ford was in a big wreck. It took them 6 months to put it back together. It was over $20,000 of damage. His company wanted to total it, but the person that ran into him, theirs didn't want to, because they didn't want to shell out all that money. So that's a lot of work on a vehicle. We're going to see if it was fixed right. I'm going to show you everything you want to check on a car when you get it back. But like I say, you want to get your mechanic to do it. My machine will go through this thing like that. This one, it's even more important because it's a diesel, and the diesels are relatively complex compared to the way that they used to be. All kinds of crazy stuff could go wrong. So we're going to go through the whole thing, but first we'll do an overview. Now it's a nice big diesel truck, and it looks cosmetically like they fixed it pretty good. All the gaps look good. Nothing seems all that off. Well, they got hit by 2 cars, so it was whacked from here all the way over here. It's got no real wind noise, but if you know anything about Fords, they make them lighter, so a lot of this stuff is aluminum. And they were talking about having to do the whole cab over, but they did a really good job. And I gotta tell you, messing with aluminum is not the easiest thing to do, but they did a pretty good job, I gotta say. Now, granted, it was done at a Ford dealership where they should know how to fix them, because, as the man said, nobody else wanted to touch it. A lot of body shops do not want to mess with aluminum. Just like years ago, a lot of body shops wouldn't mess with Corvettes because they don't want to mess with fiberglass. It's harder to paint. You got to know how to fix it correctly. So in this case, $20,000 plus 6 months time, they got it back. Now, I'm going to get my giant scan tool out. We'll make sure that there's nothing squirrely going on here. So as we go inside, we can say this thing was made in the United States. Okay, great. It wasn't made in Mexico like a bunch of GMs and Chryslers are. So the idiot lights are on and it'll talk to everything. And we'll turn all this off. We don't need any of this. Already detected it. Oh, here comes the radio. These automated computer systems are enough to drive you crazy. Okay, we got Ford. We only want a standalone diagnostic. And we'll start to get some of the information out. Here we go, F-150. It's a Power Stroke turbo diesel, 3-liter automatic. Okay. Now you might wonder why they got a diesel. Well, this thing can get close to 30 miles a gallon. You're not going to get that with any gasoline F-150. They're real happy with the diesel setup and that it's got plenty of power to tow, but it gets much better gas mileage. And of course, if you're going to pull stuff, you really need a diesel. A diesel can take it. Full topology scan. So as that goes, we'll look inside. Start it up for a second, just so we can get a better view there. You can see it's nicely set up, got all the bells and whistles, even a regular plug for 120 volts. I mean, it's a nicely set up truck. Of course, there's a ton of room in the back. Fords are always big, and you can see they got all their power stuff for the kid to play his games and stuff with. And even though it's only a 3-liter diesel, hey, we'll put it in gear. It idles smooth, and you can do the manual one, where you can shift it by hand if you want. A real shift. Instead of having to do paddle shifts, it's like a real shifter. Up, down. The question is that 10-speed automatic. Some people like them, some people hate them. That's one of the reasons it can better gas mileage. We'll see if it hunts for gears when we take it for a road test. It's a more modern one, so it may not. It's got 7 trouble codes, so we'll start out and see what's happening here. The ABS system has a code, and that code is lost communication with power steering control module A. A lot of this stuff may be related to the wreck, or it may be that they just didn't reset it. And if they didn't reset it after having this truck for 6 months working on it, boy, they really make me think the Ford dealership isn't doing such a hot job. We're going to erase that code, and it says it erased it, so now we'll check these codes. Transmission control module. It's got 2 codes. Electronic transmission fluid pump control module feedback signal range performance. Electric auxiliary transmission fluid pump A driver circuit performance. This could have happened in the wreck. Maybe they didn't fix it, or maybe they just didn't reset it. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to erase the codes, and we'll see what happens after we road test it. I'm telling you, these motor vehicles are so complex. You get in a big wreck like this, $20,000 of damage. You want to make darn sure it's fixed correctly. Because, I mean, after all, look, this baby's only got 21,645 miles on it, and it's nothing for a diesel. And here's the last codes. Driver's door module. And it was the driver's side that was all smashed in. And wild, it's wiggling the mirror back and forth. That's because it's dust and stuff. Bunch of crazy codes. Sensor supply voltage, left front puddle lamp output. That's the thing that shows you puddles are out there. Switch illumination. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to erase these codes, and we're going to take it for a road test. There it goes again. It's doing that itself while it checks stuff. Okay, now all the codes are gone, so we'll look at live data. This is why you need a mechanic to do it. This is just so it can communicate for the live data. There is a ton of live data on these diesels. See if anything looks off. Everything so far looks good, no faults. Data's normal. It even gives you the calculated soot in the oil. It's calculated in 0 milligrams. Of course, it's only got 21,000 miles. I should hope it's not sooted up yet. Gives you the milligrams of cylinder fuel rate, temperature, the cylinder heads. Gives you all kinds of information on these diesels. In the E's, let me tell you, we're looking for is bad data, red data. None has popped up yet. Didn't have any codes for the running system, so nothing can be horrible. Otherwise, it would have tripped codes. But this will tell me if things are off. It's almost to a level of a German car. We're only on the G's. Gives you the mass airflow sensor data. Even the net engine torque. And any kind of failures, as you can see, none. Even shows the oil quality fuel dilution, even though it's inferred. Not actual. Everything is no fault. They have to have these systems. These things are so complex. You'd have to, if something's wrong, you'd have to get a code with a fault to find it. Just all this data. There's no way anybody could analyze it all by hand. The computers give you a lot of help when something goes wrong. At the end, water and fuel sensor voltage. It looks good, so let's take it for a spin. See if any of the codes come back. I'm really amazed at how smooth this thing idles. It is a diesel engine after all. And it's really pretty quiet for a diesel engine. You know, they're not as quiet as a gasoline engine, but it's nothing like the old clatterers of days of yore. And with Ford's later model suspension system on these things, hey, got a decent ride to it too. They're not made for horsepower. They're made for torque, for pulling and hauling. I know it's not going to be a race truck, but the main thing I want here is to get to a higher speed to see how the suspension feels. Since this whole side over here got whacked, we'll see if there's any odd feeling in the suspension. All right, so nobody's coming. And here we go. Like I say, it's a diesel. It kicks in when the turbo kicks in. You can feel the turbo kicking in. And I gotta say, that 10-speed tranny is pretty smooth. Now let's say we want to pass somebody. We'll floor it. Once that turbo kicks in, see, it starts to move the speedometer. Not like a V8, but it is a diesel, you realize that. Seems to track pretty good. They did a good job fixing the suspension. It's not shaking or pulling or wobbling. It's a windy day today, and the wind's blowing that way, so it pulls to the right a little, but that's because the wind's blowing that way. You see the clouds. It's a nice riding, quiet truck, I gotta say. I'm not a diesel fan myself, but hey, I wouldn't expect it to be as smooth as this thing is. The 10-speed transmission, hey, it feels pretty good. It's not hunting for gears. And I would probably blame the non-hunting for gears for two things. One, it's more modern, it's a later model one. But two, it's a diesel engines. Diesel engines have a lot more torque than a gasoline engine. So when you need extra power, you don't have to rev them up like you do a gasoline engine. That's why the gasoline Ford 10-speeds tend to hunt for gears, because they don't have the torque a diesel has. Well, this diesel has torque, so we're going slow now. When I step on it, it's not hunting for gears because the transmission is reacting to a high torque diesel engine. Doesn't have to rev it up. Now, once this guy gets by here, we'll go back, and there's nobody in front of us now, so we can go a little bit faster. Here we go. You feel those turbo kicks in, man. Whee! They definitely fixed the suspension. It's got no problems. It's going nice and smooth. No shaking, no pulling. And judging by the lack of wheel bearing noise and the lack of any kind of wind noise blowing through, they did a pretty good job fixing it, I gotta say. And now comes the truth. Let's see if any trouble codes came back. So here we go. We'll do a fault scan. Nothing came back. So, kind of a surprise with the Ford deal. They spent 20 grand fixing this thing, and they didn't reset the codes. Come on now, Ford. You know, you should train your guys a little bit better than that. $20,000. And they certainly have higher tech scan tools than I do. They could have at least reset the codes. So there we have it. They did fix it correctly. Mind you, it took them 6 months, right? And they forgot to reset it. And he just told me he had to take it back a second time for that door. So when they fixed the door the second time, they didn't reset any of it. Probably because it was the same guy who worked on it, and they said, you didn't fix it right, fix it now, and they didn't pay him anything. So he was probably in such a rush, he didn't bother resetting it. But it's fixed good, and it runs just like a brand new one does. So in this case, he got lucky, even though it took 6 months to get the thing fixed. And the insurance didn't even give him a rental car. So they had to share a car while this thing was being fixed. Now you know what to do if your car is in a wreck. My advice is, when it gets to be this big, I generally tell people, push to get it totaled, get something else. But in this case, at least it was the side of the truck, right? Now, if the front would have been smashed in, all bets are off. The electronics for the diesel would have been all destroyed. The front would be all smashed. The AC, all the coolers, the power steering system would have been smashed and shorted out. In that case, walk away. Don't tell them to fix it. But since it was the side, I gotta say, they did a good job 6 months later, and now he knows it's a reliable vehicle to have. So you always want to do this when you get your car back from a big wreck, because you never know what else could possibly be wrong. And of course, if it happens later, they'll deny the whole thing. So as soon as you get it back, have a guy like me check it out. Then you'll feel safe. And if I say it's not fixed, guess what? They got to fix it. They can't wheedle their way out of it and say, oh, man, because once these guys get their money, generally, they don't want to have anything to do with you. And they'll say, oh, that had nothing to do with the wreck. That's just the baloney they give out. If you can, tell them you want to test it out before you sign the check. That's even better. A lot of them won't let you drive them out. If they do, before our money changes hands, have a guy like me check it out. Cars are complex, a lot of electronics can get destroyed. You don't want to be stuck with a lemon. Then you argue with the insurance company, they argue with the collision shop, yada, yada, yada. Have a guy check it out before the deal is done. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.